Hello, good morning everybody. It's nice to see you all. First of all, I'd like to thank Kathy. If Kathy's out there, she swapped with me. Thank you so much for swapping me. I was due on tomorrow, but I can't come tomorrow, so thanks for swapping today. I appreciate it. It's great. Right, okay, so what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about animation archives and the whole process of engaging with them, which is involved making it up as we go along. So, who am I? I don't really know most of the colleagues in this community, so it's a small introduction from me. I'm the director of the Animation Academy at Loughborough University. Got a few of my colleagues over there. Hello. And basically, most of the time I write books about animation, most recently about animation, sport and culture. But I'm also the editor of the Animation Practice, Process and Production Journal, and the chair of the Association of British Animation Collections, which I'm talking about today. Part of the remit has been to make some documentaries in relation to British animation luminaries, the most recent of which was Claire Jennings, who's the producer of Nick Park's Curse the Were-Rabbit and Leica's film Coraline, and a range of other works as well. And basically that has been running alongside a project that I'm with the BBC about history of British animation. And alongside that, which is really kind of where I've been doing most of my work in recent years, is that I'm a kind of writer and director for a whole range of programs, and over the years I've kind of written on all of these programs, and I've been doing a lot of kind of script work in recent years for all of these areas of work, most recently in relation to Student Academy Awards in the States. So a whole kind of range of kind of projects that I've been doing over the years. The focus, though, is this today. Why am I here and what do I want? That's the key process. Here we go. So, I'd like to introduce the Animation Academy Collection and the Association of British Animation Collections. I'll identify some of the problems, issues and possibilities of archiving animation materials, and I'm seeking help, advice, support, insight about this project, collaboration, partnership, and a hearty bowl of academic solace on a cold day. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, right, so you're immediately saying, well, what's British animation ever done for us? You know, what is it all about? Well, you might have some connection with it at the moment where we have crisis. There was the Ardman fire where all things Wallace and Gromit apparently were burnt and destroyed. I mean, they weren't, but certainly it was the case that, for example, some key storyboards from Nick Park's film, The Wrong Trousers, were burnt. And as it happened, he'd already given me several as a gift once, which was great, but I ended up giving them back to him because I couldn't bear the thought that he would be out without his own stuff. So essentially this brought attention though to the idea of animation materials and the whole kind of idea about production materials and where they go and where they're archived. And I thought a lot about that and did a lot of kind of, phoning around and thinking about it. And obviously there really weren't any animation archives. There were some animated films in some collections, there were some piecemeal kind of collections in various places and so forth, but there wasn't, as it were, a British animation archive. British animation deserves an archive though, because probably unbeknownst to most people, it's highly probable that actually animation, and certainly stop motion animation, originated in the UK. We think animation always of Disney, The Simpsons, Pixar, we think of it as a Hollywood tradition, but we have a very long and beautifully, developed tradition in this country from obviously 1896 onwards effectively. And there is an argument that says some of the first animated films per se were made in this country, and certainly Arthur Melbourne Cooper's work can be very much seen in that light. Equally, of course, in our celebratory years of Shakespeare, we might not know that there were kind of burlesques and cartoon burlesques of Shakespearean plays that took place in the 30s. The only reason we know that they exist, though, is we can't find any of the films, but we know some of their production materials exist, their promotional materials exist. And this is where the kind of issues, of course, about archives come to bear, in the sense that we have to preserve all of these materials to preserve these histories. And this is where the kind of anxiety has occurred within notions of British animation, because we have paid no attention really to the preservation of British animation history. We know, for example, people like Lancelot Speed made important films during the First World War. The Imperial War Museum has some sense of that, but there's all sorts of other things that took place during the First World War, for example, which were commercial productions that we actually don't know little about, but nevertheless which were kind of war-related. There's much research to be done. We need archives, and we need the thinking about archives to engage with that idea. We have a collection at Loughborough University, Animation Academy collection, and these come from a whole range of British production companies, some of which you may have heard of, but certainly the key issue for us has been really saving materials that would have otherwise been destroyed or lost. And that's been a key aspect for us. Now you're immediately asking, have you therefore, Paul, got a fantastic archive at Loughborough? And the answer is no. We have a set of stuff in the roof. That's where we have it. The reason we have it in the roof is that it's the only free space, and I mean that economically and in terms of space. There's nowhere on the university that we wouldn't have had to hadn't have paid a cost a fortune for us to actually try and save materials. But luckily the estates manager at Loughborough University tapped on my door and said, I like what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do. I know that you can't find anywhere in the university to put this stuff, so I'm going to find a big roof space for you to at least store it in the dry and in the cool. So that is so much of our materials, but that's where they're residing currently, in a roof. What are we going to do then? Well, in our materials we have lots of interesting stuff, not least of which, for example, but perhaps controversially now, we've got kind of all of Rolf Harris's Cartoon Club, and I've just written a kind of editorial in my journal to actually talk about the idea of, should we now forget about Rolf because he's got some dubious personal life, or should we actually look at the work that he actually did? And there's some interesting kind of challenges for us there. But a lot of that comes out of the fact that, of course, that there are these materials that that help make these programs. Not least of which the fact that they liaised for all of them with Chuck Jones from the Warner Brothers studio, in order for Chuck Jones to train him how to actually draw Warner Brothers characters so that he could teach British school children. So there's a whole range of kind of things that come out of that. We have all sorts of storyboards and background materials to a whole range of children's programming and so forth. But one of the key things that we've fundamentally done is save Bob the Builder, Pingu and Fireman Sam from the loss of all of their pre-production materials from the beginnings of their creation right through to the moment where they just became CG programs. That means saving puppets, saving sets, and all the origin artwork and all the origin scripts that would have otherwise been destroyed. We have become white van men. We went and got into all these places and took hundreds of boxes out just to preserve them, that were going to go into a grinder and be lost forever. So that's our main kind of claim to fame in terms of what we're trying to do. We've liaised a lot with the National Media Museum, and in the first instance have been promoting the idea of the archive through the Bradford Animation Festival, and we did the idents for them in 2009, and we've done in subsequent years presentations and projects related to the archive aspect. We should give a shout out to the University of Southampton in the first instance. Many moons ago now, they tried to actually get an animation archive off the ground, but their restructuring meant that actually they got rid of their archive immediately. And that was the first kind of signal that things could just be put in the bin at will. Thankfully, colleagues elsewhere at Farnham and myself, basically then working at Teesside, saved that collection, and it became the kind of journey towards creating a loose association of British animation collections. What is ABAC? Well, it's essentially a group of stakeholders which collectively shares the ambition of celebrating and preserving the influence and legacy of the British animation industry. These are the kind of loose partners, and they're all loose partners because everything is being put in, for the most part, in kind, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But fundamental in all of that is some key players and key brands who have helped us at least preserve. We largely take pre-production materials in Loughborough. The BFI largely take the films. The National Media Museum largely take production artefacts. Other places have particular collections that are germane to their university context or their ownership in the first instance. So how did ABAC emerge? Well, it emerged basically because of significant concerns about the potential loss of animation heritage, studio closures where all sorts of 20, 30, 40-year histories were just being skipped, commercial focus, basically if animation companies are working, they're concentrating on contemporary work and not planning for saving their material or archiving it in any way. Animator death, lots of animators who have worked in the industry for a very long time with personal collections, sadly, are in the throes of old age and dying, and material is being lost there. There's a limited address still of the animation discipline, although that's got much, much better. But key is that there's a multiplicity of different kinds of production materials. Thousands of different kinds of things go to making up an animated film, and that's one of its problems. People will take the finished artifact, the film, but they might not take a puppet, a set, production drawings, and a whole myriad of other production artifacts. There's recognition that no single organisation collects, maintains and develops a comprehensive collection of British animation, and we had the first inaugural meeting about this as long ago now as November 2008. What's its mission? Well, obviously to safeguard the nation's animation legacy and preserve material evidence, to influence strategy and policy in relation to preserving and using animation heritage, ensure that this resource is valued and embraced, and to celebrate and recognise it as a significant national legacy. That can almost be a kind of rhetorical thing for all kind of things that people value from the past now, but we needed a driving scenario. So what's our progress and problems actually been? Well, they've worked out like this. Initially, we had a successful GISC and Cartoon Museum funded report scoping current animation collections and materials. But further submissions to various funding bodies have gained limited success, and that's been a real challenge for us, since most of the feedback that I've got from virtually all funding applications has been, this is a brilliant project, Paul, but the thing is about it, we need to fund this kind of work now, and maybe starting as big a project off from kind of almost from scratch as this is something that we can't facilitate. So, successful liaison for a number of years with the National Media Museum and the Bradford Animation Festival to profile ABAC for 7 years actually, with the development at that point of a possible Ray Harryhausen Centre. Now, Harryhausen might be known to you as a great stop-motion animator. He has huge collections, and it looked at one point where all of his personal collection was going to be housed at the National Media Museum, and a centre for British animation collections might go with that. It was a wonderful, halcyon, hopeful moment of glory, but near closure of the National Media Museum through funding cuts and ultimately the cessation of the Bradford Animation Festival in 2014 drew all of that to a close. We've collaborated too with the Netherlands Institute for Animation Film on archiving practice and collaborative projects. They were teaching us almost a methodology of how we might do this, but the closure of the NIAF happened unfortunately in 2013, again through funding cuts. Personal commitment and effort by passionate individuals has kept this project going, but it's been compromised by personal issues. I've been seriously ill, for example, and I'm back on the train now, but that's knocked us back a lot. And institutional vulnerability. Wherever you go, institutional vulnerability about funding, particularly, has made investment in projects very, very difficult to engage with. However, some things have been achieved, and we shouldn't really kind of forget that. Crucially, we worked a lot with the House and Batchelor collections in all of their work to develop a whole range of projects. And I've been with Vivian Hallis, the daughter of John and Joy, on a number of kind of projects almost across the world now. We've released, for example, a short film collection, and on that is a documentary made by the Animation Academy in Loughborough about John Hallis, and that's now toured festivals across the world, and again, has kept this kind of project alive. We've also released other things, Tales from Hoffnung and Ruddy Gore on other collections, book about Joy Batchelor, but crucially a history of the Hallis and Batchelor studio as well. So we've been able to kind of, develop projects accordingly. Crucially, our work in this whole archiving area has drew us into lots of kind of projects whereby we've been invited to participate, curate, provide materials and so forth. Major show, the animation show in 2011, Watch Me Move at the Barbican, still touring worldwide. It's had massive figures, and we've been a big kind of curatorial force in that. At the same time, we've also got a kind of curatorial expertise about the presence of animation in early cinema. We were asked, for example, about Charlie Chaplin's film Zept, which is the only one that is known to have his attempts at trying to use British animation from the period. And we've actually looked at the kind of who that was and how that works at the time, and we were able to identify the animator who was involved. So our kind of reputation about animation archives is strong, but it still remains a kind of virtual idea. Crucially, where we've managed to kind of maintain a real profile is making documentaries kind of on thin budgets and lots of goodwill that actually have profiled key figures in the British animation industry. Our most successful probably has been the McKinnon and Saunders film. They are major puppet makers who made the Bob the Builder puppets and so forth. lots of puppets for one of Britain's leading animators, Barry Purvis, but crucially for Tim Burton in all of his films. Burton's been great and really supported our project, and that documentary really has gone worldwide now, and again it's got lots of attention for our project, but unfortunately still loads of currency, lots of validity to what we want to do, but kind of little progress in how we can work with it. So the things that still keep me awake at night are these: the importance of physical, material and economic investment in the archive sector, most specifically animation, OBS, you know. There's loads of other things we can invest in, but I'm just going to talk on the animation's behalf here. The significance of heritage culture and the rehistoricisation of modern life. There's much of me that has got a hobby horse about the idea that we're just concentrating so much on the specificities of now that we really are forgetting that all the kind of models that can be attained and known about from the past are being kind of forgotten or sidelined in terms of where monies are going. The necessity for collective action in regard to proper recognition of the importance of materials and processes. All of this kind of like, again, I'm sure, concerns for all of you. The need for engagement with materials as cultural resources, though, that they're not just artefacts and dusty artefacts, but things that we can use, and that they are the embodiments of skill sets and knowledge. Crucially, for example, in the McKinnon and Saunders documentary, there is detailed information in that documentary about how to make a puppet. You know, if we lose those kind of skill sets, stop motion, 3D animation, you know, could suffer, and certainly the whole nature of how real skill sets can be attained by people wanting to learn those things, which are embodied in this work, can easily be lost. And obviously it's a politically significant issue. What actually are we valuing and why? The importance of knowing, of course, that archives are not just about the analogue past, they're about the digital present and future. And ultimately, those two things have to come potently together. For me, though, there is now a need for wider networks of support, dialogue, exchange, and mutual development. And that's why I'm here today, to speak to you. And if there's kind of any kind of interest in this kind of work and you'd like to have dialogues about it, that would be great. It would certainly prevent this happening. I look at this poster regularly and say, should I go to the pub and just forget this as a project? You know, just get heartily drunk? Or should I still save our heritage? And I'm thinking, let's keep saving our heritage. So that's my email address. If you're interested in any of these projects or any of these ideas or any sort of dialogue, that would be welcome. I thank you. Thank you very much.